Welcome to Travel Secrets with me, Tanya Rose, the podcast sharing wisdom for fellow travellers. Each week, I ask my guests to reveal their 6 travel secrets and the trips and holidays that uncover them. My guest today is the wonderful, dynamic Theo Fennell, known as the King of Bling for his eponymous brand's flamboyant jewellery, and his clients from Madonna, Lady Gaga, Elton John, and many, many more. His designs have taken inspiration from churches to fairgrounds, and I'm sure that travel has inspired many of them. He grew up in Egypt and had a colonial upbringing. He set up his Theo Fennell jewellery shop in the 80s, and I met him in the 90s when we did various dinners together for the Hotel Bel Air and the Carlisle, which were great fun. His book, I Fear for This Boy, is the funniest book that I have ever read, and I've also listened to him actually reading it and cried with laughter. I cannot wait to hear his travel tales. Welcome, Theo.
Hello.
Before we start,
Hello.
Perhaps you can tell us a little bit about yourself and about how travel has moulded the man that you have become today.
I had a very, very peripatetic childhood in that, as you say, I was born in Egypt, and then we went to Pakistan, Quetta, and then to Germany, France, back to India, Malaya, back to France again, and then we pretty much settled in England. But I came back to board as a boy of 6, actually 5 when I left to go to boarding school, which I never really minded very much, but discovered later that if you said to a girl at dinner, of course I was sent to boarding school at 5, they immediately made much of you.
I thought you were a poor child.
Yes, almost the first thing I would say. I was sent to boarding school at 5. Oh, no. But I don't think it played with my mental health as much as some people thought it might have done. But what it did do is get me travelling on my own at a very, very early age. Nobody seemed to mind, 5 or 6-year-old getting on a plane.
That's
and
amazing,
going off
isn't
to
it?
wherever it was. And those really were the days of unbelievably fabulous travel, really glamorous travel. And it's when I first found myself being looked after by air stewardesses when I was sort of, I suppose, 5 or 6 years old. There was a thing called universal aunts, which nobody will remember now, but a lot of very, very big tweedy women who looked like Margaret Rutherford. And you would have a thing saying, my name is Theodore Fennell. I'm going to Quetta in Pakistan, wherever it was. And they would take you from Victoria to the London Air Terminal, and then you would go down straight from there on a coach, on a bus, to your aeroplane, which then you were handed over to a stewardess in a little box hat and a pencil skirt, who would then chuck you under the chin and look after you until you got to, say, if we were going to Malaya, we'd stop at Karachi for the night, where another tweeded old lady would take you to the place called the Minwalla Grand Hotel, which is about the size of this room, and you'd spend the night there, and then she'd take you to the airport and you'd fly to, in this case, KL, to Kuala Lumpur. So it was, I got very used to traveling and to assimilating the local cultures and things which I loved, the noise and the colour and what have you, and the food, and the people who were, all the people I came across were fabulous.
And did you love growing up there?
Yeah, I mean, I loved it because it was the absolute yin to the yang of being at a cold boarding school, during which people still don't believe. I mean, my daughters don't believe. They think I grew up in the olden days, as they refer to it. Everything was black and white and sort of moving at a sort of silly pace. But the school was, during rationing, a really cold and lonely place, as Conway Twitty sang in Mona Lisa, a song you won't know, but one that's very precious to me. So it was amazing. And then you get on an aeroplane and you would not just be abroad, you would be properly in a different world because you'd be...
completely different cultures.
Yeah. I mean, there was no television or whatever. You had the home service or the foreign service that you could listen to if you could, the occasional test match. But otherwise, letters took weeks to arrive and you didn't have newspapers, you didn't have whatever. So news of home was a very sort of special thing. And if you were a boy, you didn't care about news from home. You just asked around with the locals. I had a great friend in Malaya who was one of the garden boys, and he and I used to go and try and find snakes. He more than me because I was terrified. And he'd say, I find one, and I go, good, and run away.
Please don't show me.
Yeah, I did find that in every culture and everywhere we lived, every boy my age was braver than me.
And still today.
Still today, they're braver than me, yeah.
Let's go into your travel secrets. What's the number one destination that you think everyone should go to once in their lifetime?
Well, I think for an urban place, I think New York. Everybody should go there because I think it's exactly like you think New York is going to be, even more so, which is a very rare thing. I mean, almost nowhere is like you're going to expect it to be, because there are parts of it you think are like they should be. Paris, for instance, the centre of Paris is very much like Paris, but suddenly you get outside and you could be anywhere and it can be hideous. But New York, the noises, the taxis, everything is a sort of cartoon of itself. And even you get out into the Bronx or you go out into, well, actually the places are now fashionable. In the old days, like the meatpacking district and all those sort of places which were hideous, but now, incredibly pricey and whatever, rather grand. But the noises and everything is, and the kind of locals are as sort of rude and funny as you'd hope. I was being interviewed once by New York Magazine by this very, very precious gentleman. And we were standing outside. Jono Schwartz had gone in there to buy some things for the kids. And they were very, very young. And so we were standing outside and he had this big contraption with him and a microphone and there was somebody sort of filming it. And while he was doing this guy came and stood here and looked at me in the face. Then he looked at the question. Then he said, poke me in the stomach. And I said, can I help? He said, are you famous? And I said, no, not really. He said, well, why did you just fuck off then? Which was just so...
Exactly as you expect New York to be.
Fair enough, mate.
And probably still is today, I would imagine.
And it is. And I think people who haven't been there, which lots of people haven't, just need to experience it because they've seen so many movies, they've seen so many kind of television things, and it is like being in a great big movie set. So I think everyone should go and have a look. And I think for sort of, as it were, countryside, I think, India, up in the hills in India is just so lush and unbelievably beautiful. But in fact, you can go down to Wales, frankly, or Ireland and see pretty much the same thing, only with rain.
Yeah, sadly.
But, the parts, I've just come back from Herefordshire this weekend and, the valleys and the hay at its best are, this time of year, unbelievably beautiful. And most people have never been there, sadly.
You grew up in Pakistan, but did you actually live in India?
No, I didn't really grow up anywhere because, we moved sort of every year or two. So I didn't really grow up anywhere apart from, wherever my father was stationed at the time. So I suppose the places I spent the most time abroad that I knew were Malaya because we were there for a couple of years, which of course is an eternity when you're, 7 or 8. And then I guess France when I was sort of 10, 11, 12, which is, when you really start getting into music and all that sort of stuff and popular culture. And, seeing the NAFI, which was the British Army's kind of place they went to buy things and have a drink and, like a pub or whatever, which was like a sort of working men's club in sort of Grimsby. And over the road was the PX, which was the American equivalent, which was like a shopping mall in California. You couldn't believe the difference between the two cultures there because we were still, we'd won the war, but, lost the peace. We were a broken country. We had no money. As I've always said, the British squaddies were so funny. Really? Their humour, their sense of humour, their this sort of gallows humour, their sense of being the downtrodden ones, but not minding. which is very much a sort of a British trait. This idea of
self-deprecating,
and prepared to put up with almost anything, sort of phlegmatic. And they're on the other side with these sort of very brash Americans, chewing gum and with their kind of Camel cigarettes tucked under here and whatever. But for a young boy, you could buy any record. I was listening to Stax music and all that sort of thing. I mean, really wonderful music you never got in England. We only ever got the sort of my heroes in England, with sort of Cliff Richard and Adam Faith, and compared to Elvis and the real, not quite the same thing, but I genuinely preferred the kind of quiet English version. But the PX had everything. It had Americana coming out of its eyeballs. It had the movies, the new movies. It had candy you couldn't believe, magazines, Archie comics and Superman comics, and whereas we had the Beano.
Cliff Richard and the Beano.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so
it was
sweet.
very different, and it really sort of made me think, which do I prefer? In a way, I loved the kind of lack of depth of the American culture, being an incredibly shallow person. I loved that, and I loved that kind of whole display of pink Cadillacs and open cars and madness. But on the other hand, I felt far more at home with sort of a Morris Minor.
Yeah, so naive.
And my sister's reading Bunty and things. It just seemed much more kind of
so sweet.
As if we were much more in control.
Easy living.
Yeah.
What's your most unexpected travel experience?
It's a different one because I think in some ways it's sort of it goes with an amazing trip I had to Jerusalem. When just after my father had died, my mother was going to go with him to see my sister who was living in Jerusalem for Christmas. And because he died, I said I'd go with her. Not something I would normally have done. But anyway, we got to Jerusalem to find it snowing.
Oh, wow.
Christmas Eve.
Wow.
I mean, it never occurred to me. A couple of days before Christmas. So it was actually snowing. We'd been told to take warm weather gear, sort of English spring gear. So we weren't really expecting it. They'd organised for us to go to Bethlehem,
Beautiful.
to midnight mass in Bethlehem on Christmas Eve.
Lovely.
I mean, what could be more apt? I felt like one of the Magi. But my brother-in-law, my sister's husband, being a sort of rather grand Roman Catholic, at least in their foreign office, and Israel is very important, Bethlehem specifically in Jerusalem, very important to obviously the Roman Catholic Church. So neither my mother or I were Roman Catholics, so we weren't quite sure how it was going to work. We went through literally sort of road checks and whatever from Jerusalem to get to Bethlehem, and there we were in the cathedral in Bethlehem, and we were there for hours. Midnight mass, because people had come from all over the world to take communion.
Oh my goodness.
And neither of us could take communion because, we were...
And they were all queuing up to have it.
Queuing up and round the block. I mean, when I say round the block, I mean, from Korea, from, everywhere, all over the world, queuing up. And we were also slightly oddly dressed for a midnight mass in Bethlehem. Everybody else was wearing some diplomatic clothes, they're sort of rather grand clothes, and we were sort of...
In your shorts, because you thought it was going to be spring.
No, we weren't actually. I'd taken a tweed suit, and my mother had one of her sort of ludicrous sort of, tweed suits that those sort of women used to wear in those days, with a sort of, not quite a tie, but a sort of blouse and a brooch and hat. So we did look slightly out of place, but it was, and everybody else was either in kind of diplomatic kit or clerical kit, all the sort of... Berettas and what have you, mitres. Anyway, it went on for hours. It went on for so long that I literally simply, I was dying for a smoke. I was dying for a drink. And finally, at something like 3:30 in the morning, 4 even, we were let out. And I was about to leap outside and have a gasp. But when this man came up to me and said, well, now we're going down to the place where Christ was born. Oh, fair enough. Anyway, so we're going down, about 12 of us in a tiny thing the size of a bathroom, which is apparently where our Lord was actually born.
How unbelievable.
And they've got the old sort of smoking handbag, sort of mitre going away, whatever it's called. And so in there, it's unbelievably, I'm sort of virtually passing out. Anyway, my mother, we then leave, says, I've got to go and have a lie down. I said, I'm going to go and make a telephone call because I want to ring my girlfriend because it was Christmas morning. And I thought in Hampshire, it'll be Christmas morning and I'll ring her. So I went over to a little bar where I ordered a large brandy and a cup of coffee, lit up my gasper in the days we could do such things. And there was a little telephone kiosk, the sort of thing they used to have in those things. And they said it would ring when it was time for me to pick up my call. So I went over there, and when it rang and I picked up the call, I heard this voice saying, hello, hello, hello. You have a person call? He said, who's that? He said, and her brother, who's a very, very funny and laconic man, said, hello. Yes, that's my name. And she said, I have person-to-person call for you from Bethlehem. And he said, don't tell me it's a boy. Actually,
that is brilliant.
You could have set it up. But the point is,
that is very good.
The reason it was such an unexpected thing, apart from being in Bethlehem Christmas Day, was these Franciscan monks who my sister had befriended cooked us Christmas dinner, absolutely with all the trimmings, in Israel. They'd managed to get
turkey
everything.
And
they'd found an old copy of Mrs. Beaton's cookbook. Wow. And it had got Christmas lunch, or Christmas dinner, as she called it. And we had roast turkey, bacon.
Potato,
not easy to
stuffing.
Get there. Stuffing, but everything done as if it was sort of 1900, 1910 or whatever she wrote the book. So we had all sorts of things like, berries I'd never heard of, inside the stuffing, and God knows what, roast potatoes, odd sort of sausages. I mean, some things were a bit strange because they quite gathered it, but we had plum pudding with brandy butter, and it was fantastic.
How amazing! That really is an unexpected.
Franciscans in their sort of friar tuck outfits.
How fantastic!
Couldn't have been sweeter. I almost thought I got so drunk by the end of it because they had all this sort of extraordinary booze that monks everywhere have. They live. A lot of them live very well indeed. And, Benedictine and all that sort of stuff, we obviously came from them, but whatever their version was unbelievably lethal. Anyway, I got very, very drunk, as they did. Everyone got very drunk, including the monks. And I really toyed with the idea of becoming a monk. That evening, I remember saying to my mother, I think I'll become a monk. And she said, how in books it says, pachaw, and it's a word. And she actually said that she had pachaw, she said. So I thought, well, there is such a word. Because I woke up in the morning and thought the last thing in the world I want to be is a monk.
A monk? Oh, that's absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, but it was the most extraordinary, I couldn't have expected any of those things to happen. And it was something I wasn't even going,
Amazing. So travel secret number 3, what's the most overrated travel experience you've ever had?
Without doubt, going back to the place of my birth, Egypt, with my wife as a special treat. She hated it from the moment we arrived. They took our passports away and lost them.
Oh dear. And
we were meant to be on this very special boat that I'd booked that was going to be, just 4 couples but away from each other in their own suites, in this sort of old 1930s sort of bargee type thing, going up see the pyramids along the Nile. And somebody else, much grander than us, had booked the whole boat for themselves. So we were put on something called the Ramesses II. And I have no idea what happened to the Ramesses I, but I suggest it's at the bottom of the sea somewhere. But it was like a huge cross-channel ferry.
Oh, no.
With the most extraordinary collection of people on it, including a huge bunch of ladies of a certain age who were the Canada and North America, or North America and Canada, I can't remember which, Holy Land Tour Christian Society, which is all, in many ways, very good. But they had a lot of happy clappy for hours on end, very early in the morning and just before dinner. And we tried joining in, but they wouldn't have it. They thought for some reason, we were pulling their legs. And on the very first night we sat down to dinner, Louise was hating it. I was, but I was trying to make the best of it. Our suite with the view turned out to be a tiny little cabin with a sort of pointy bed because it had to fit into a certain thing. And our view was that of the Egyptian sailor's buttocks as he squatted down by the anchor. And he never moved. I mean, it's an endemic thing there, but he never moved. And our first night at dinner, we sat down, a table for 2, and there was a gap to the next table. And this man sat down in a sort of blazer with a huge sort of crest on it and a cravat. And a silly moustache, and I thought, he can't be a retired Winco, but he was. He was a retired flyboy, RAF type, who said, do you mind if we come and join you? Which they did, and then proceeded to tell us how he was doing up his house since he'd retired. He was doing up his house, the whole thing by hand. He was doing absolutely everything. And on he went. And when we got to our room, Louise said, I'm going to kill him if I see him again. We cannot have that man anywhere near it. Anyway, the next day we were taken round, as you are in Egypt, to see somebody's cousin who makes scent and somebody's other cousin who makes carpets. And that's all you do. And we discovered this chap making up the hieroglyphics.
Oh,
so he'd say, this says, and, Namely fought the Romans, and you go like this, and we go,
doesn't say
well,
that.
hang on, a moment ago that was the Romans, and now it's Beatles, And you go, well, it's different, He was just literally, I thought I could have this job, it'd be great, you could just make up it. But anyway, we got back that evening, and he sat next to us again. He said, and I'd said to Louise, if he does sit next to us, I'm going to see how quickly I can make him say, I did all the grouting myself, just to entertain us a bit. So, it's rather unfair, and I'm not terribly proud of it. But anyway, we sat down, and I said, fascinating, I've been thinking about your DIY. You do literally everything. He said, oh, yeah. And I said, but what about plumbing? Oh, yeah, plumbing, everything. I said, but in your bathroom, for instance, are you a wallpaper man or a tile man? Oh, very much a tile man, he said. And I said, but that's quite complicated. I mean, doing, that he went, I did all the grouting myself, literally.
Did you cry with laughter?
Yeah. We had. I didn't. I just. But it only lasted 10 seconds. I mean, literally, I thought I was going to have to sort of cajole him through the whole of dinner to say it, but he just came. He said that was the end of that.
What a shame.
And then on the last day, or the last couple of days, we said we're going to go back to Cairo. We've seen the Nile. I mean, this bit of the Nile. We've seen the wonders of Abu Simbel. We've seen the wonders of Luxor and whatever it is. And they are so, they're so commercialized and whatever. Let's go to Egypt. Let's have a look at Cairo rather. Let's have a look at the museum in Cairo, Tutankhamun.
Yes.
As I learnt to pronounce it rather than Tutankhamun, which had been quite happily.
Yeah.
Yeah, quite obviously. Tutankhamun or Khamun. I know it was very complicated. So we went in there, and it was if you would go to the, I can't think, but the Agricultural Museum in West Wittering, it had about the same sort of standard of just everything was there covered in dust, just sort of, under a glass thing. You went, my God, that's Tutankhamun's tomb. Just in this sort of, things crowded like a sort of, like a bric-a-brac shop. Anyway, so he said, okay, let's go and see the pyramids and the Sphinx and, stand in the wonders of the desert and look around us and do whatever. And then we'll come home and have a, proper dinner. Anyway, so we get in a cab, and say the pyramids, something I've always wanted to say, to be honest. And he drove to what would be the equivalent of Hendon in London and said,
There they are.
There they are, mate. What are you talking about? And they're sort of, surrounded on all sides but one, which is where all the photographs are taken, with the pyramids looking, pretty part worn, to be honest. Obviously, they're quite old. Literally surrounded by kind of, Mackie D's and a golf course and whatever, just in the middle of nowhere. So we go round to the Sphinx, which I don't know if, like me, I thought it would be about the size of the Albert Hall.
Yes,
the Sphinx. We go around the corner, it's a thing about the size of a dog, And I agree, it must have shrunk, with all the sand and everything.
No nose.
But I think, no nose, I mean, it really needs some work done on it. But I imagine being Napoleon and going, really? Was thinking about the Sphinx and the Battle of the Pyramids and going, hardly worth... Anyway, so that was really disappointing. So Egypt was disappointing.
That's a shame.
From start to finish, my homeland. I wanted to go to Ismailia, where I was born, to see if there was a blue plaque.
Theo was
on the
born
mud
here.
hut.
Sadly not.
Sadly, no. We didn't even know where it was, actually. We didn't know where. Kept on saying, where's Moasca? They're going, no such place. Again.
But I was born there.
I was born there, yeah.
That's brilliant. Let's do travel secret number 4. Food and drink is very important to all of us.
Yeah.
Where is the best meal you've ever had, or the restaurant that you love most in the world, or the drink that you like, or just let's talk about food and drink.
Okay. The best drink I've ever had in the early part of my life was fresh cherryade at the Runnymede Hotel in Penang, where we stayed for some time. And they made it with cherries.
Oh, wow.
And I've never had it since. But I can still taste it. Occasionally I smell something that tastes quite like it. So they crush cherries, as you would sort of citron pressé or something. Then they'd, do you like the accent? Anyway, they crush the cherries, put sugar in, and then fizzy water, and then you've got this absolutely delicious thing. I think that was the best drink when I was young. I think the nastiest drink I've ever had was a great friend of mine took me into I think it was probably Tramp, and said, had I ever had a top shelf? And I said, no, what's that? And it consisted of getting one of those big brandy balloons and having one shot from everything on the top shelf of the bar.
Nasty.
And no, I've done it. I then did it many times since then to astonish other people. It's very occasionally it doesn't end up sort of a murky brown colour, because that's what sort of, the brandies and the whiskies get in the way and things. But occasionally I've had a really bright, sort of violet or pale blue one. That, I'm afraid to say, set off a sort of chain reaction to a very, very undistinguished night.
I bet. Tramps closed down.
But it's been opened again.
Oh, has it been reopened?
Some bloke has brought it. He's going to make it into a sort of incredibly shishi thing with, for very rich.
Well, Alistair and I went recently before it had closed, and they said, "Are you really Alistair Simpson?" And he said, "Yes." And they said, "You are our oldest living member."
Really? Oh my God.
It was so funny.
For that, so I'm not.
No, my husband is. My husband is. He was very, very amused. We got a very nice table, though. Make way for Alistair. Make way for Alistair.
That was sweet.
It was very sweet. And what about restaurants? What are your favourite restaurants?
My food tastes are incredibly, I'm afraid to say, simple and unsophisticated. And, I'm taken, or I've been to all sorts of unbelievable restaurants, and I've never really appreciated them. And people say, oh my God, the lark's tongues and aspic here are absolutely delicious. Have you tried it? I go, I really, so my favourite food is probably, embarrassingly, American food of the deep fat fried. An onion bloom. They do a thing called an onion bloom, which is an astonishing thing. It's a miracle of civilization. They cut up an onion, just throw it in a deep fat fryer and batter, and it just comes out like this huge sort of triffid. It can take two men over a week to eat, but I can get through them very quickly. I had one of the best things I've ever had, which was roast sucking pig in Toledo, in Spain, where they make a sort of point of it. But again, because it was so much a point, it was all a bit shishi and a bit whatever. I just wanted to grab hold of a sucking pig and eat it rather than sort of have all the other bits.
Yeah.
But that was delicious. But, it's places I love. I love, the Column d'Or, because it's just got great memories. LA had some wonderful places, all closed down, the Daisy and Ma Maison, all those places suddenly gone. And I kind of wonder what happens to great restaurants when they disappear. The Sambuca, which I used to go to all the time, just off Sloane Street, suddenly gone, disappeared. Probably the most disgusting thing I ever had was in Japan, where the chairman of the company I was working for, who was sort of like a god in his country because he was old and incredibly rich and owned all this sort of stuff, and therefore was sort of a demigod, took me to a restaurant on the lucky me, the day when sea anemones didn't kill you within 10 seconds. He didn't tell me this. He just handed me this little bowl. And it was sort of full of egg white type of stuff. And when I looked inside, it had something moving in it. And I just thought, I can't do this. And I said, what is it? He said, sea anemone. You swallow it in one go. And I watched him swallow it. And he went, And apparently the whole point was, as it goes down your gullet, it sort of tickles you. Oh. I had to go and all the egg white went down. And the sea anemone lodged on the back of my tongue. So it just wouldn't move. And I could feel it moving. I thought, I'm going to
die.
And of course you can't let yourself die in front of Japanese because they don't understand it. It appears to be terribly rude and all that sort of stuff. So I just sort of pushed it forward and bit into it. And it really exploded like a sort of sewer going off in my mouth, and then I had to drink a huge amount of sake to get rid of the taste and whatever. And they were all terribly disappointed that I hadn't got it right the first time, so they bought another one. And I said, no. So that sort of food, anything very clever like that or sort of whatever. I have a great friend who loves, or says he loves, but he seems to eat it a lot, so perhaps he does, sort of offal and brain. And I once, showing off, ordered lung in France because I thought it was something else. And the person I was with saying, you like that? And I said,
love it.
I'm at one with it. I love it. And the thing arrived, it looked like a brain. It was sort of grey. and knobbly, and sort of cut like hard roe. You remember how hard roe used to cut, sort of slightly. And I thought, I can't leave a bit because this man's watching. He said, "Oh, I haven't had this for so long, you know. He's fantastic. Is it good now?" Oh, it's best I've ever had.
Oh, my
and I ate each bit.
Did you? Were you absolutely ill afterwards?
So I incredibly simple taste, really.
I actually listened to one of the podcasts that you were on where you said that your favourite thing was fish finger sandwiches.
Pretty much is.
Yes, it's my husband's too.
Oh, I think nursery food, I mean, I really do like things like fish finger sandwiches. I love kippers. Don't get those very often. I love any crumble. You know, almost anything in it, as long as there's enough crumble. I like places that have simple menus.
Yeah, and I think it is all about the people you're with. Let's do travel secret number 5. What is your best insider travel secret?
Google Walk. If you're somewhere like Rome or New York and you want to get to 35 Via Apologia or, you know, West 32nd Street, whatever it is, if like me, you have absolutely no sense of direction, if you go on normal Google or something, you find yourself going around all these roads because they're one-way systems, whatever. If you look at Google Walk, it shows you just cut down to, you know, 3rd Avenue, turn right, do that, and you're there. And in Paris and places like and in fact in London, you suddenly realise that how close everything is together. And because you're so used to having driven it, or because most of the ways and things takes you the way of a car, you know, you can find yourself walking around in circles for hours. Whereas with Google Maps, suddenly you're there. It's been an absolute blessing for me, somebody who's been, you know, walking around strange cities for hours, saying, you know, "Do you live here?" No. It's extraordinary when you stop to ask somebody the way. You never
find a Frenchman or whatever.
Or a local of any sort. And it, after a bit, it just gets so pitifully desperate that you just think, I'll just sit down here and get a cab.
So if I'm on my app for Google, I just press Google Walks. That's a different app, is it?
Well, Google
yes,
Maps,
and then
Walk.
Google Walk. Ah, okay. I shall do that.
And yeah, it is extraordinary how quickly it gets you, you know, from A to B and whatever.
And probably takes you down nice little side roads so that you can find things off the beaten track as well.
It can take you down the Street of 1,000 Knives or something that's been famous for years as nobody's got out the other end without being stabbed.
But at least it's quicker.
But it's quick, yeah. No, it's interesting. I do enjoy walking around. I mean, if Louise ever sees this, she'll hoot with laughter, but I do enjoy wandering, I think, is more, although I don't like dawdlers. Dawdlers on the pavement, absolutely infuriating. So people suddenly stop and go, "What?" on their thing, you bump into them. And they go, "Oh, man."
Or people walking and looking
I know, I'm surprised more people don't die a terrible death crossing roads, looking at their
phone.
These are old man's gripes.
No, but I think that's a very good tip. Thank you. I shall definitely be going on to Google Walks. Let's do travel secret number 6. What is the memory from a holiday or a trip which is still poignant to you now?
So we had a selection of completely inappropriate holidays with some money my mother left me, who I never thought A, had any money, or B, would leave me anything. But she did. And so I thought, in her memory, we would go on a few holidays till the money ran out that she would have absolutely hated and hated us going on. And the first of which
You had a good relationship.
No, it was always a bit fraught. The first one was across Tennessee in a kind of 4-wheel drive thing from Knoxville up in the top right-hand corner, and Dollywood and, you know, bluegrass music and
lovely.
That kind of thing, through Nashville, Grand Ole Opry, you know, the Country Music Hall of Fame, and all that sort of stuff, down to Memphis.
I would love to do that trip.
Fantastic trip.
And the music, everywhere you go.
That's the most wonderful
You go
thing.
into the bar.
You've got the history
and
of American music and history really of our music as well.
Amazing.
And we just had the most fantastic time. And the further south we got, the more we enjoyed the music and the more kind of fun we had.
Did you go to Muscle Shoals, is it called?
Muscle Shoals.
Yeah.
We didn't actually, because we went to some other place. We went, for instance, to the old Brunswick recording studio where I had to be made to pull myself together. I was sort of weeping so freely because it was where Elvis made a whole lot of songs, and where the Everly Brothers and Jim Reeves and whatever made all these songs, and had all the instruments they
Oh,
used.
how amazing.
And we did a recording, sort of en famille, the four of us, of Dream by the Everly Brothers with the original backing track.
How extraordinary.
And the man who ran it, who was a very sweet, very precious man with a big walrus moustache, said, "You're going to have to just man up, Theo. If we're going to get this song done, you need to man up." So I had to sort of...
Were you weeping?
Yes, I had to cut my schnavels and sing that song. But they had these amazing things around, and he played some things that had been recorded in there, Roy Orbison, whatever. Then we went to Gracelands, and I was inconsolable, standing next to
The king?
the king's grave, tombstone, and that of his little twin who died very young, and mom and dad. And a most unprepossessing house inside, you can imagine. It's
What
like,
Graceland is it?
it's sort of like something you might find in Weybridge on the outside. Then when you get inside, it's full of sort of Americana and the most extraordinary things in there. So sort of 10 tellies, which now seems so stupid to have, but you'd have 10 tellies, which was a huge kind of luxury back then. You weren't allowed upstairs to the scene of the death, mercifully, I think, because I think that would have made me
Break down.
very upset. But we stayed, it's sadly no longer there, I think, unless somebody started up again, in Memphis. We stayed at the Heartbreak Hotel, and we couldn't find it. And we were going up and down, Route 603 or whatever it was. So I rang the hotel and I said, "Excuse me," he said, "how can I help you, sir?" And I said, "We're coming to stay tonight." He said, "Oh, you're going to be guests of Heartbreak Hotel. Well, good on you." And I said, "We can't find you." And he said, "Where are you?" And I said, "We're Route 603. He said, "You go past a Wendy Burger or whatever it was. You'll find that's Lonely Street." I went, "Okay." He said, "We're down at the end."
Of course you are. Of course you
what I said.
are. Of course.
And because we had it on speaker,
You were all
both my
crying
daughters
with
and I,
laughter.
we just went,
Marvellous.
welcome to Memphis. Just terrific.
That's brilliant.
It was a wonderful time. It was funny. We had, we're all, into all sorts of music, whatever, and just, kitsch and hysteria. And there wasn't a thing not to enjoy. We went to nudies to buy clothes, and we went to all sorts of, ludicrous places to buy cowboy hats and
Amazing.
Elvis clothes. It was fantastic.
Love.
I recommend it.
I honestly, my dream, and Alistair's, because we love country music, is to go to Nashville and go to Dollywood and go to Muscle Shoals and to Memphis and just to do that whole thing. I absolutely
It's a
want
great
to.
trip.
Yeah. Lastly, I asked you to bring a photograph that summed up travel to you. Can you just tell us about the photo and what it means to you?
Well, actually, it's on a beach in Italy in about 1968. And I used to go and stay with my sister who lived in Bologna, but she had a house in a place called San Vito in the Abruzzo. And her husband is from the Abruzzo, Romano, or her husband was. And to me, it was extraordinary because I would get the train from Victoria to Pescara in Italy, which would go down through Paris, down the coast, along the coast, and then over across to the Adriatic coast, and then
All the way on the train. Wonderful.
change once or twice. And it was being absolutely on one's own. The carriages, because I went steerage, obviously, because I couldn't afford anything else as a young bloke. But I was still at school when I first used to go there. I suppose what would now be called a gap year, but it turned out to be a gap rest of my life, to be honest, the way things went. But I went down there, and there were, Italian workers. Once you got to Paris, and once you got down to there, coming back from places, and so it was a whole kind of human life was there. And because it was normally August, if people were going on holiday, coming back, whatever. So I'd be in a carriage with, a whole lot of Sicilians or other Italians going home, or Germans going on holiday, and this incredible cosmopolitan sort of bunch who was squeezed together. But I was on the road on my own, and of course, when I got to the other end, everyone there was Italian. It was before you had lots of travel, everyone going everywhere, and so I would get to somewhere like, as this was San Vito, and there would be just Italians, and not just Italians, but particularly kind of parochial Italians. So I was a sort of unusual person. And, because I'd be there a month, I sort of made friends there. And it was like sort of at a young age, being in charge of your life abroad. And I think anybody who's ever been, came up to London when they were young, didn't live here, would go, oh, I'd like to live here, then I'd be a London. That sort of excitement of going to a town and saying, I want to be part of this. I found the excitement of going to this little kind of holiday village, but, a fishing village outside holiday, and meeting all these people who had real lives.
Yeah.
I had no sense of whether they were, well-born or poor or rich or anything, other than they were just really nice people. And I didn't speak much Italian and they didn't speak much English, but we sort of got on very well. And we sort of became these odd friends. And we played billardino, we played lots of, table football and what have you. And you could take a bowl into the pasta shop or the sauce shop, and they give you a sauce, and you just go and boil up some spaghetti and put it on. So it was like a fish and chip shop, their version. And the jukebox that night, you sort of hung around there.
Amazing.
And the jukebox, the big song, was a song called Rain and Tears.
Oh, I don't know that.
Rain and Tears was by that enormously fat Greek man that wore
Demis
a kaftan.
Roussos.
Demis Roussos, exactly. I won't sing it because it's very high. But, I remember that, and I remember I Threw It All Away, Bob Dylan, which for some reason was a big hit out there. Also a huge song called La Prima Cosa Bella, which was a man called Nicola De Bari, who was this huge person over there and was probably their equivalent of Engelbert Humperdinck. But they played it the whole time, very few British songs. And I just found myself in a different world. I was part for the first time on my own without sort of any
feeling like a local.
Hanging around the locals. And then I discovered a way of going to Pescara with a guitar. I could sing in clubs. Nobody understood a word I was saying because nobody said English. And there was this sort of Englishman in the 60s with a guitar from
London.
From London, yeah. Although I wasn't at the time, playing his instrument and whatever. And I suddenly thought, oh, this is a bit of all right. Until I got back to London, everyone went, thought I was a brat.
Oh no, that sounds fantastic. How lovely.
And I imagine myself to be in love with all sorts of local girls and visiting girls and whatever. But the moment I met their brothers and parents, because you couldn't take anybody, even to lunch.
Oh, really? Without meeting?
You literally, it's impossible to believe now, but, if I'd just said, should we go, I couldn't even go in the sea.
Oh, really?
With a girl,
on your own.
Without a brother coming or whatever it is. So if you took them out to dinner, not only would you be there.
And the brother and the father.
There'd be a table here with a mother and father and grandmother and whatever, and a table here with all the sort of brothers, that generation and the cousins and things. The good thing about that was, of course, it let one off the hook, having to sort of try anything.
If you didn't want to.
Well, no, not if you didn't want to. Knowing that you might be turned down, one was far too nervous. Just said, well, of course, had it not been for the mother. But there was something very joyous and kind of innocent and intriguing about being part of another, genuinely part of another place. Since then, obviously, one's lived in other places and done other things. But it was the first time I really felt, that I was a member of the world rather than...
Gang. Wonderful. That's
whatever.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for that photograph and for explaining that. And thank you so much for telling us about all your travel stories and secrets. It's been delightful. And thank you so much for joining me.
Well, thank you. It's been fun.